Morning. This is Homebirth South Africa. Lana with you. Ruth is unfortunately ill today and unable to be with us, but we have got the lovely Kgaogelo Lephoi, who is a mom to 4 beautiful children, a wife, a social worker in private practice. And she responded to our call requesting sort of unusual or sort of maybe not the norm planned home birth stories. And so welcome, Kgaogelo.
Hi, Lana. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we've had lovely in-depth conversations about your experiences, and I'm really pleased that you're able to share this with us. But yeah, just give us a bit of background. So you've got 1 daughter followed by 3 sons, and your first daughter and your first son were natural births in hospitals. And I mean, by your own sort of declaration, they were good births.
Yes. Yes.
Especially given the high Caesar rate in our private sector.
Yes.
But still not sort of what you wanted. And you really had to advocate for yourself in those situations. Yes. And then, yeah, we sort of will get into how you came about to choose to have 2 unassisted births. So, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, so again, good morning, and thank you so much for having me on this podcast, I would call it, or yes. But I am a mom of 4 living kids. I've had 8 pregnancies. It's important that I highlight that. And of the 8 pregnancies, I've lost 4 pregnancies, and it was in between the births, the other successful birthings. And the first pregnancy, it was a typical, so I think maybe I should give a background. I was born in a village clinic in Limpopo. My mom is Mopedi, so from Limpopo, and I grew up in an environment where birthing is associated with status. Even now. Therefore, when we were ready to have a child, it ideally made sense for us to go private because of the fact that private is seen as successful, is seen as a place where you are likely to get more health attention, as well as people will prioritize you. And I went in with those expectations, and I was pregnant. When I fell pregnant, we had the privilege of being monitored by Dr. Mtupi in Mafikeng. So my husband and I moved to Mafikeng, which is the northwest province of South Africa. Then when I fell pregnant, he was one of the 2 gynecologists at that side, who we felt comfortable with, and he did a brilliant job. It was an easy pregnancy. However, when we decided to then give birth, in my culture, your first child, Mosotho, your first child, you give birth by your mother's family. So it also has incentives to be birthing at home. So yes. Your in-laws, what they do is they're supposed to come and fetch you with the child, and they give you a present. So okay. Of course, I wanted those things. I wanted the prestige of having the first child and experiencing that cultural rite of passage with my mom. Yes. However, we continued to opt for private, and I gave birth in Ermelo. The doctor that was providing a service to me in Northwest was not providing the service during the birthing with my first or my second, right?
Okay.
I don't remember the doctor who provided the service in terms of birthing. That I don't remember the name, but I gave birth there. And on both occasions, with my 2 first births in medical environment, in the medical private environment, I felt disempowered. I remember quite distinctly having, you know, family pray, and my husband seeing that, particularly with my second birth, my husband seeing that, of having a dream that my son's cord was around his neck, and in that process, the hospital, when we started letting the hospital started noticing that my baby's heart rate was going down, it was like, we need to do an emergency C-section right there and there, and not necessarily giving us the opportunity to think it over, to decide what we want. But also, it is really during the laboring process, I also felt disempowered, because at that time when I found out, I remember saying to my husband, if you can see that this is a challenge, you need to pray about it, because we believe that there's a spiritual interventions that take place with our bodies. We are not just bodies, but we are spirits having a human experience. Therefore, intervention should come from the spiritual side as well. So I remember distinctly saying, if you could see that my son is having that cord around his neck, please pray about it and let God change it. And the nurses around were saying, okay, we might have to consider a C-section. They had already called our gynae to do a C-section, and I went and I took a shower. As I came out, my waters broke, my mucus plug came out, and I was standing, mind you, and as I was standing, I told the nurse that the baby's coming out. And I was dismissed, like, no, man, you have had an easy, your contractions were mild, and you know, Lana, you've been in an environment where women labor differently. I'm one of those women, when I labor, I'm not very loud, but also my body, I suppose when they were tracking, the contractions wouldn't have, because I suppose those machines, they check the level of stress that you go through. They wouldn't have picked up that I'm laboring as I should, because they you know, those little thingamajig wearing going
Yes.
super. It wasn't therefore then they assumed that I wasn't laboring as I should. Therefore the baby is not coming as it should. But then my body has a way of doing what it does. And at that time, my baby was already head down, coming out, and I let them know. The nurses couldn't believe me until one of the assistant nurses actually looked up at me and noticed that my baby was coming out, and I was rushed, and I wanted to labor standing. I kept saying, this is where I feel most comfortable. I want to labor like this. And they said, no way are you going to labor like that. And my husband, I suppose because he understands, also maybe he knew that we talk about malpractice quite a lot. And I suppose in the hospitals, they're scared should something happen in the position that you choose. They're worried that you're going to interrogate them and say, you didn't know. Therefore, they forced me to do what they thought was best. Unfortunately, I then labored lying down. And as I labored lying down, what ended up happening is I tore when I gave birth. Indeed, my son's cord umbilical cord was around his neck, but within minutes he was breathing and everything was fine with him. I didn't need a C-section. And I always say it was divine intervention, because the doctor came, I think, 10 minutes after I had given birth, and really his job was just there to stitch. And which in retrospect, I really think it was divine intervention, because I was not ready for a C-section, and I would have gone for a C-section had he gone then during that time. Yeah.
So then fast forward to that, from that birth, you moved to a different province and were now pregnant again. And this was smack bang in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
And your husband is a medical doctor. And tell us a bit about how that decision with those factors came to be, choosing a home birth firstly, and why you didn't choose a midwife.
Yeah. So yes, my husband is a medical doctor, but he's not in any way comfortable, let alone I often say when my husband and I are laboring, he forgets that he's a medical doctor. He becomes a daddy. And all the knowledge that he knows about a woman and anatomy, like it just flies out. So during the time of, so he's a great partner in that sense, in terms of birthing. He always says, let's do what works for you. And I'm thankful for that, because sometimes I believe that if you are in the medical field, you can interfere thinking that you know it all. He's humble enough to say, I don't know this area. So when we fell pregnant with our third, it was during COVID, and it was in a different province. And during COVID lockdown, there were quite restrictions in terms of what they were for one to have in terms of the birthing. When you're going birthing, you needed not to have people around. And the idea of not having my husband around just gave me anxiety. And the idea of also, I'm quite far away from my parents or my mom, so she wasn't going to be there. And even if she was going to be there in my house, she wasn't going to be allowed at the hospital. And also during the lockdown, the rules kept changing and it was just fuzzy. And that for me just created a discomfort. Already you are pregnant in an environment where it's a new environment, it's a new community. And then on top of that, they say the people that you need the most are not going to be there. So my husband and I agreed that, okay, let's look for alternatives. And for me at the time, home birth seemed like the logical sense. We did a bit of research, and then we then agreed that, okay, let's find someone that can provide the home birth. Initially, we had agreed that we would opt for a midwife, but the more I did research and I managed to find a community of natural birth supporters together with midwives available. But the more I researched in my community, I couldn't find the midwife that I was looking for, which I was quite specific. I wanted a midwife of color, simply because I wanted someone that I can communicate with without having to use English all the time. Number two, someone that I can have a conversation with without needing to explain why I needed those conversations to be had. And also, I know that it's such an intimate space. So I think looking back retrospectively, I needed a mom, I needed a mother. And my idea of a mother is someone of color. And at that time, I couldn't find a midwife. Therefore, my second option was to go for what was my second option at the time was a doula. And I found a doula, and I went the route of unassisted birthing.
Okay.
So
then, yeah, once that decision was made, was there any resistance from or concerns from family and friends? And what did you do to sort of keep moving forward?
So my mother-in-law, she passed away, may God bless her. So she didn't see anything wrong with it. Her daughter gave birth at home with her second son, her second child rather. And my grandmother gave birth to my mom at home. If anything, there was more support towards going for it rather than against it. My husband did not even see any other option at the time, because he was in and out of hospital and he could see how uncomfortable and anxious provoking that environment was. So once we agreed that we are going home birth, it was great. So in terms of support from our family, it was awesome. My sister, one of my sisters was there when I gave birth at home. My mom was there when I gave birth at home. My mother-in-law, because she's from Lesotho, during that time, during lockdowns, they were not allowed to travel. She could have been there. She wanted to be there. from family in terms of support, it was amazing. And that is what I wanted as well, to have my family around. And I think when I look back in terms of my first home birth, I was quite specific in terms of what I wanted. I wanted an environment where I'd feel home, I'd feel supported, and I'd know that my kids are in the other room, so that should they need to come in and out, it was an environment where they feel like they're part and parcel of it. And that was the case. And my supporter at the time, my doula, she was also very much aware of our expectations, and the meetings prior to the birth, she actually asked us what was it that we wanted in the environment, what was the expectations, what would have made us feel comfortable. And she made sure that she honored that. But also what I appreciated was that it wasn't just me laboring, it was me and my husband laboring. So she provided the support for both me and my husband prior to going into it, and also during the process of laboring and giving birth and post. So it always felt like it was us. It wasn't just me alone throughout that process. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about it. But my first birthing experience was quite a very intimate experience. It went beyond my expectations. So, you expect, okay, I've had 2 babies before, I'm gonna give birth, I want the baby to be healthy, great. I did not anticipate the spiritual healing and the emotional healing and the trauma that I had as a child, finding myself healing through my laboring process. That I did not expect and I didn't anticipate. So when I was young, I got molested at around 5 years, 6 years. And I didn't even realize, Lana, that I had there was something that had detached itself from me, and almost feeling a sense of the body not belonging to me for many. And when I gave birth, even now as I talk about it, it's something that I can't even escape, the fact that I remember distinctly feeling like I was coming into myself. And I look at my boy, he looks so much like me, physically that is. And I wonder if in any way there was a connection to that, but it was such a healing experience. And my birthing was so, the word I would use it was holistic. Everything about me was touched during that birthing experience. And there was a reconnection towards me. And there was a healing. And I'm glad that I chose the route that I chose. It was really a divine process for me.
Oh, that's so amazing. And in the aftermath of that birth and your following, I mean, because you mentioned your sister was there and your children were, I believe, they were in the house at both your labors. What has that ripple effect been like?
So again, one of the things that I do is when I birth quietly and I become one with God and I become myself, and I go inwards. So when I was laboring during the day, it was a fun experience, which, by the way, even my mom, after giving birth to 4 kids, she could not comprehend the fact that I'm busy dancing and I'm in my, I'm having fun. She kept thinking, are you okay? And I realized that she was a bit anxious initially, during the time that I was during my early laboring stages, because I think in her mind, she was hoping that at any moment now I'm gonna get traumatized, but I was okay. And then when I realized that my mom in particular, she was quite anxious. I then decided that they should all go to sleep. So I gave them the task of taking care of my 2 other kids so that I can just remain with my son, my husband, right? And my son in the womb and my doula. So the process was beautiful in the sense that in my early laboring, it kind of even though she was anxious, it was a moment for us to reconnect, for her to see birth in a different view.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And for her to appreciate, during the process as we were laboring, we're talking a lot more about my birth, what was happening when she was laboring for me. Excuse me, let me just do this. When she was experiencing labor with me, and we were talking about it, and I remember taking a 5-kilometer walk, coming home, and putting my son at the back, who was 2 at the time, and dancing with him. And she kept looking at me with such, I must say, for the first time in a long time, I saw my mom admiring me. And it wasn't something that I was expecting of my mom to do, because during labor, who admires a woman who I wasn't in fact, I was expecting her. The assumption is she's the one who's holding you, nurturing you, but it was the other side where she's looking at me like, wow, this is happening. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I labored, and the following morning when they came, I remember she ran from the room. And she was like, okay, what's going on? And she found that the baby was there already. Oh, she was excited. It was such I remember at one point, all the kids were in the room. My mom was there. Everyone was there. It was such a, wow, look at this. A sense of awe, but also a sense of relief, because there wasn't any tear. There was such calm. My husband was doing a skin to skin with the baby at the time. It was like the sun has just come out. And that feeling, everything was gloom, and then, look at that. And that was during COVID. So you can imagine emotionally how everyone was feeling. So it was beyond relief. It was so much thankfulness. So we subsequently agreed to also do our second home birth. And the feelings between the first and the second was also different. The second one, I had lost my mother-in-law. So I was going through grief, and I was also, I was going through grief at the same time I was pregnant. And I was conscious of the fact that I remember me and my husband, I was not emotionally connected I struggled to connect with my baby, because I was struggling to say, how can I celebrate this young child while I've lost one of the most important people in my life, being my mother-in-law. And it took us a while to really find our connection. To be honest, I think throughout that pregnancy, I was just working on survival mode. Again, I must highlight that I tried the OBGYN in Cape Town during that time, and in private practice, and I was very disheartened. If anything, I felt like it was not a route that I was going to continue with. I went in for 2 sessions, and each time I'd come back anxious, if not more anxious than I went in. And I knew, because I understand, gynaes are there, or OBGYN are there to give you what could go wrong instead of what is right. But I just felt like it was overly done, that I just felt like, I'm not sick, I'm pregnant, and I've done it before. And instead of feeling like instead of getting validation or celebration for the fact that I birthed the third one at home, I felt like you sinned, almost like doom and gloom. How could you give birth at home? So for me, given how healthy and healing the third, my birth was, I knew that I wasn't going to be I wasn't going to allow another energy that is going to go against that. So then I continued to opt for what I already was going to do. I just thought having an OBGYN was going to be great as a side support. But then I stopped altogether and just decided to go again through the unassisted route. So again, the difference, like I said, it was because we had lost our mother-in-law, but my sister was going to be there, which I was thankful for. So she was there during the time when we were laboring. So she was able to, together with my lovely helper at the time, they were able to take care of our baby, and I was able to labor. The difference though is that this time my husband was feeling anxious. I need to highlight. And his anxiety was, he had a dream that I had passed away. So it could be that because of the fact that he had lost his mother before, so he was worried that he was going to lose me. But also because of the fact that, like I'm saying, that there was a bit of a disconnect between the birth and going through mourning. But what also again healed me was there was such a sense of me, myself, and God. I felt like it was a spiritual process again, the laboring. It was an intimate experience. Even this time, because I had done it with my third baby, there was a level of expectations of what to expect. So I wasn't anxious previously, but then I wasn't leaning too much on my doula like I did the first time. It was, okay, this is what I'm going through. This is how labor feels like. I could identify. So to the point that I can even say that if we were to use the word pain, I wasn't in as much pain as like the last one. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember us having this conversation about, even with your husband saying, like, you did the minimal scans, and that actually from that point on, you weren't interested in, the baby's position, whatever. He was more interested in knowing the spirit of this child coming in. And that had a lot to do with him being in mourning for the death of his mother. So yeah. I felt like he was guarding the spiritual plane almost. And I think that's, I remember him saying that.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So we didn't even check whether it was a boy or a girl. We didn't do most of the scans. We didn't actually go for them. And we really just focused on our spiritual process during the time. Yeah. And even the music I was playing, the laboring experience, it was really a spiritual music. And the attention was just making sure that the environment is spiritually cleansed, so that the baby that is arriving can arrive and feel welcomed. And I believe that it was also, we needed we needed that baby to overcome the grief that we were in. We needed Matla to be born in the time that he was born, in order for us to see the light at the end of the tunnel and go through the grief of, Ma, you are not around, but it's okay. Look at this child who is part of you. Funny enough, he looks like he's my mother-in-law. Again,
amazing.
Again, it's just that spiritual connection where you realize that, okay, birth is as important as death. And when you have a sense of awareness of self, it can become a process of worship. It can become whatever that you want to be, or whatever meaning that you want to attach during that time. And I remember seeing my husband feeling helpless, but being okay with him being helpless, because I genuinely felt that having lost his mother, he felt helpless during that time, that he wished he could do something. And now the conversation was, it's okay not to do anything. Allow God to do what he needs to do right now. And so it was a process of healing on a different level for both of us. And that's what Matla is to us.
That's so amazing. Kgaogelo, yeah, I couldn't have asked for a more amazing discussion with you. I do know that you have another appointment to get to. So just, yeah, anything in closing that you'd like to mention?
We had a conversation with my husband about the importance and the lack of importance when it comes to medical interventions. We're talking about, we had a different conversation where we're saying that, you know, we appreciate the Western, and I say Western, not necessarily in terms of culture, but Western in terms of the new modernization process. The modernization process, what it did was C-sections were always there in our cultures, in our history. If you look at African history and the birthing, you'll realize that there were traditional people who knew how to do a C-section if a need was there. And I can't, and unfortunately, there's no stats to either support whether they were successful or not, but there were C-sections before. And also birthing and the process of birthing, it was seen so natural. However, when hospitals were put in place and removed that from us, there was also something that we lost in the process. And I think when I talk about my privileges of birthing, both in private as well as at home, I consider that privileges because I now see what could be lost if someone is always interjecting on your space, and how in itself can hinder you spiritually, because I genuinely believe that birthing is a spiritual process and it's a spiritual act. It's therefore, I think when I look back, one thing that I could say is giving a woman a choice about where they can birth and having the right resources for them at the time, such as a doula or a midwife, could actually allow them to bring a sense of self or discover themselves on a deeper level than they did. It doesn't always have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, when you cut surgery, like it doesn't have to be, there's an English word, a very nice English word I'm looking for.
I mean, it comes to mind, like, it doesn't have to be mechanical, it doesn't have to be cut and dry. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be mechanical. There could be a lot of points that one can heal. There could be a lot of things that one can discover. It doesn't have to be painful. And it's certainly, that pain in itself could actually be healing. It can be a gift. But one thing I can say is I came out of this experience feeling more empowered, and it has healed certain aspects about my family and my reconnection with my sister as well. There's another young sister that I have, Hoti. It has made her feel like, whoa, should I fall pregnant? I didn't know that I can use this and this and this. I'm looking for it. And I'm like, you're 25. Wait, let's wait.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but if anything, it's brought our family closer, but it has also made me aware that there's such a precious gift in the process of birthing. And it also has an influence even how you go about nurturing those kids that you've been given the opportunity to raise. So
amazing, Kgaogelo. Really, just so many little gems in this conversation. I thank you so much. And as always, lots of love to your family, to your husband and extended family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm happy to share any conversation or have a conversation with anyone who would love to have another conversation about this. More so if a woman is going through this for the first time, I'm happy to have a conversation with them. Okay.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.